there's no hook here. Where is the story?
Right. It's a very interesting world. It's a very interesting backstory of a character,
Yeah.
but there's no story as of yet.
Yeah. And we are 60 lines in, which is a lot.
Releasing your inner dragon.
All right. Welcome to another exciting episode of Releasing Your Inner Dragon. Today we're going to dive right into the first brutal editing of 2025. How you doing, Marie?
I'm doing good. I'm looking forward to getting back into like critiquing other people's work and commenting egregiously on everything that they do.
We're not that bad.
I
At least I
mean,
hope.
we are, but it's in a good cause. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in all fairness, they did send it to us, knowing what they
They
were getting
sent it
into.
for this purpose, so here
Yeah.
we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they did ask for it literally in the email. I'm kind of excited about this one.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know anything about it. Haven't looked at it just like normal, but it comes from a guy who grew up near Bluefield, West Virginia, which is the town that I lived in when I was a wee little lad.
Okay. It's
So,
also it's grimdark, which is not a genre that either of us are too deep into, so we'll see
mm-mm,
what we make of it
yeah,
and take it as it comes.
but representing the West Virginia folks, the old coal miners, the Appalachian hillbillies. Let's see what we got.
Okay, so I'm going to read as I normally do, and I'm sharing the screen. So if you're just listening to us, remember that you can go to YouTube and read along with us. Okay. In the world Sarah lived in, emotion had long been outlawed. It wasn't an abrupt change. There was no single day when the leaders of society decided that feelings were too dangerous to be allowed. Instead, it was a slow erosion, a silent shifting of norms. First, they outlawed rage. Too many fights, too much chaos. Then came sadness. Who wanted to deal with depression when everyone could be medicated in believing things were fine? Before anyone realized it, love, joy, grief, everything that made people feel human had become an enemy of the state.
All right, let's stop there and do one
Yep.
maintenance thing real quick. Go ahead and turn on line editing. I just realized because I'm
Oh,
trying to,
right.
I'm
Line
like,
numbers.
I'm like, oh crap, I can't write a line number down for my notes.
Yes. There we go.
Perfect. And also for all you listeners who are brave enough to send us stuff, a couple things. It would be nice if you send it to us in Word documents. If you don't have Word, send it in a PDF. We'll deal with it. But it does. We are doing you guys a favor, so do us a favor by sending in Word and having line numbers turned on, and you know
Yeah, that would be
makes it
nice.
easier on us.
It is nice to get it in Word and with the line numbers so that, we don't have to remember to do it. Anyway, so let's just comment on the opening paragraph. It is a little bit more world buildy than I like to start with per se. But this is a short story.
Oh,
So
is
I
it?
understand, yes, this is a short story. So I understand the need to get the information conveyed early.
Then that changes. Yeah, that changes
Yeah.
everything because it starts off very omniscient, very highbrow narrator telling us a story and not putting us into the moment. But if it's a
Mm,
short story, especially depending on the length of the short story, sometimes you just don't have the time.
yeah.
That's one of the things that I do love about Chinese cinema over American cinema. So like, what was it? I think it's Black Mass. It's a Jet Li movie that came out in like the 90s. And the movie starts off with, in the not too distant future, the government has created super soldiers using this thing and they can do this thing. And then you're just thrown into it. And I'm like, if that was an American movie, the first 45 minutes of the movie would be them doing what you just said in like 4 lines. And then we would have to cram the movie into the last 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, or you could just voice over, this is the way the world is. and just get
And
into it.
and like obviously that is telling, right? But sometimes, like if you're doing a short story or a novella or something like that, sometimes you just need to tell. And then you make the telling as engaging and as short as possible and give the reader what they need, which is
Yeah.
more or less what the opening paragraph does.
I'd push back a little bit on novellas. I still think you have plenty of time in a novella to
You,
get us into the thing and organically give us this information.
yeah,
So like, if this was a novel, let's say, I'm just going to start in Sarah's life. And I'm
mm,
just going to give you her moment, and I'm going to, through her interactions with the world around you, or through the interaction with the world around her, we're going to find out that emotions are outlawed, that it was something that happened over time. Everything in this paragraph I can do during the opening scene and have it be completely organic. But that's going to take me 4,000 words. And if it's a 3 or 4,000 word short story,
yeah,
then you don't really have time.
yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, it
All
really
right,
just depends on what you're doing. I
all
do have
right.
one little edit that I'd like to talk about in this opening
Yeah.
thing, and that is really thinking about punctuation and the gravitas it can bring to a sentence. So if we look at on line 3, instead it was a slow erosion, comma, silent shifting from of norms. Putting a period after erosion, instead it was a slow erosion, period, makes that a stronger statement. And then by having a silent shifting of norms be its own sentence, that gives us that as a punch as well. I'm
Mm,
not saying that this has to happen. I'm just saying this is something to think about. When I'm going through an editing mode, I'm actually looking at my sentences, and sometimes you have two really cool things in a sentence that when they're together, it weakens it a little bit. And when you separate them and have them just stand alone on their own, it has more punch to the reader. They're forced to pay attention to it more. And so like a silent shifting of norms is such a powerful sentence that when it is tagged on as a clause on a longer sentence, it loses a little bit of its punch. So again,
yeah.
this isn't an edit. It's not like, oh, this is wrong. You have to do it this way or anything like that. But just something to think about. When you're looking at your sentences, sometimes you have two really punchy things, and you might want to think about breaking them up into two sentences just to kind of let each one of them stand on their own and punch the reader with the power that they have.
And now, obviously, a silent shifting of norms is a sentence fragment,
Yes.
but it's a good sentence fragment, in my opinion,
Yeah.
because, and as long as you don't overuse sentence fragments, they do have value and merit. Just don't overuse them.
As long as you don't overuse them, and there's never a question of what it is attached to.
Yeah.
Like when you read these two back to back, instead it was a slow erosion, period. A silent shifting of norms, period. Like there's no reader is going to confuse. They're not going to read that and go, a silent shifting of norms. A silent shifting of what norms? Like literally it is a part of this discussion that we're having in this paragraph. So no one is going to be confused by that and thrown out by the fact that they hit this fragmented sentence that isn't connected to anything, because it is connected to something.
Yep. Okay. Picking up on line 7. And so they moved to rid the world of emotion. Now, if you laughed in public, cried, screamed, or even showed too much excitement, it would cost you. The punishment wasn't immediate. Most people never saw it coming. The AI-driven police force that had replaced humanity's lawkeepers was silent, cold, and methodical. They monitored the world through countless lenses, biometric scanners, and sensors to analyze body language, detect facial expressions, and tone of voice. A momentary slip, a crack in your emotional armor, was enough to get you flagged. If you were lucky, you'd receive a warning in the form of a demerit to your social credit score on your pocket device. If you were unlucky and ran out of credits, they'd take you to Elysium. That's where they sent the broken ones, the ones who couldn't control themselves. It was where emotions were purged, chemically, electrically, or mechanically. They called it rehabilitation, but everyone knew what it really was: obliteration. Down by the ruins of the old Interstate 85 overpass, Elysium sat like a mausoleum, where the big, wide, dual-lane road had once joined in a giant cloverleaf interchange with the roads below, deemed unsafe for traffic by the state decades ago. Oof. I have lost my way in the sentence. I need a map, a compass, and possibly some directions. This is the run-on sentence to end all run-on sentences.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Um, okay. Where the big wide dual lane road had once joined in a giant cloverleaf interchange with the roads below, deemed unsafe for traffic by the state decades ago, barricaded off. Man, that is confusing to read.
Yeah, that's a rough one.
Okay, so seriously, you can't. I mean, you can do that. Obviously, you can do that. This author's just done that. You can't do that. Okay,
Yeah,
you're breaking the sentence with your M dashes between the thing and the verb, between the subject and the verb.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that. It's too confusing. Like it's impossible to pass the sentence.
One of the things that I try to push people on when they're going to use their M dashes is use them in replace of commas. So in other words, like if we are going to do, let's say we're not going to change this run-on sentence at all, just moving barricaded off before it. So Clover interchange with the roads below barricaded off, M dash deemed unsafe for traffic by the state decades ago, M dash, it had decayed into it. That flows so much better. I mean, comparatively, this is still a massive run-on sentence.
It's still too long. It's still too long, but at least this way, where the big, wide, dual-lane road had once joined in a giant cloverleaf interchange with the roads below, barricaded off. Deemed unsafe for traffic by the state decades ago, it had decayed into crumbling concrete, exposed rebar, and overgrown vines. I can now read it as one thing. But it's still too long, and you've got a lot buried here.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you can do, once you move that M dash, you can easily see that one of the easy fixes is just put a period after barricaded off, and then capitalize deemed, and then just put a comma at the other M dash. I mean, it still needs, I think that first sentence needs work, the first part of that sentence, the one that we just created as a first sentence. But at least now the second half of it, deemed unsafe for traffic by the state decades ago, it had decayed into a crumbling concrete, exposed rebar, and overgrown vines. That's actually a fine sentence by just pulling that out and making it its own sentence, because it's all one topic. It's all about the decrepitness of this building, the decay of this building. It was deemed unsafe by the state decades ago, and it is this now. So that all goes together. All that the beginning of it needs, it still needs work.
This sentence is weird. Like it's weird. I'm still struggling to understand what's going on, but the second part at least makes sense now.
Well, one of the weird things,
if your sentence spans 3 lines, if it's over 25 words, really take another look at it. Like, I'm not saying there's never a place for a very long sentence, but this one was ridiculous. And the amount of concepts in the sentence, it tells you about the dual lane road. It tells you about the giant cloverleaf interchange. It tells you that it's barricaded off. It tells you that it was deemed unsafe by traffic from the state. It tells you that it has decayed into crumbling, exposed rebar, overgrown vines. There's just too many pieces of information in here.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. But, oh, you have some more on this?
Go.
I was going to say, but I also want to kind of talk about this section that you read. So we started this off by reading that really telly opening paragraph but it's all very interesting stuff. Like as a telly paragraph in the in the scale of teleparagraphs, that one is a very interesting, captivating, intriguing teleparagraph.
Yes.
But then we get to the next couple.
Yeah.
And so if we are writing a short story, one of the things we have to keep in mind is word count. In the last episode, we talked about commitments, and you have that statement that you love: for everything you say yes to, you're saying no to something else, including something that you may already be doing. Well, it's the same thing it's the same philosophy you need to have in short stories. So every time you add information into it, it means you can't add other pieces of information. So one of the things that I would do if I had written this and I'm editing this now, I would ask myself, does knowing how they actually monitor the citizens impact this story? And it may. I don't know. We haven't gotten far enough to decide that. But if it isn't a crucial piece, if just knowing that they do monitor the citizens, but not actually how it's monitored. So in other words, the AI-driven police force that had replaced humanity's lawkeepers were silent, cold, and methodical. They monitor the world through countless lenses, biometric scanners, and sensors to analyze body language, detect facial expression, and tone of voice.
You can literally cut this
if-
whole piece.
If, well, not the last line. A momentary slip is actually kind of cool, because that's not a how they did it. If the how isn't instrumental, in other words, if we don't need to know the how that they monitor for the climax of this story or whatever, then there is 50 words, 40 words, somewhere around in there that can be cut, that can be used to be more showy in other places. Like if we just read this without that, now, if you laughed in public, cried, screamed, or even showed too much excitement, it would cost you. A momentary slip, maybe we even want to contrast that with the last one. Even a momentary slip, a crack in your emotional armor was enough to get you flagged. Again, I'm not saying cut it. What I'm saying is asking the question, does the reader need to know how they're monitoring this, the details of it? Because if they don't, there's 40 words right there that can be used to take some of this tell and turn it into a show, because showing always takes more words than telling. If the writer's like, no, 100%, they have to know that it's an AI-driven police force. They have to know that it replaced humanity's lawkeepers. They have to know that they monitor it through countless lenses, biometric scanners, and sensors to analyze body language and detect facial expressions and tone of voice. If they have to know that, or they won't understand the ending of the story, then okay, great, put it in there. But my bet is they don't. They just need to know that the government is watching. And so that's something that, when you're in that short story mode, it is a different way of thinking. It is a different way. Not only can you lean a little bit more on telliness, as long as it's a telliness that is engaging and exciting and piques your curiosity, like that opening paragraph does, but it also, we want to make sure we're cutting out anything that isn't crucial to the story so that we can use those words to be more showy in our writing, to be more immersive in that short story.
And then I want to just talk about this sentence. It was where emotions were purged. So that is a very powerful statement. And I feel like it's being a little bit obscured by being in the passive voice.
Yeah.
I feel like you can make this more impactful by saying, they purged emotions there. Or even flipping it completely and going, chemically, electrically, or mechanically, they purged emotions there.
Right.
Because the cool part of the sentence is here.
Yeah.
That's the part that's the most interesting.
Yeah.
So I would consider flipping this to active voice and starting with this.
But then we have some other things in here too. So like line 7. And so they moved to rid the world of emotion. Like after that opening paragraph, this is absolutely, as you know, Bob dialogue, because I already know this. you've already told me this sentence in the opening paragraph. So again, a lot of this next part can be trimmed down to help us save word count that we can then use. Because if you are writing, let's say this is a 1,500 word short story or a 3,000 word short story or a 5,000 word short story, you only have that many words. And so
Yeah.
you're constantly looking for those opportunities to go, yeah, the reader doesn't, this is cool information. And that's the thing. I want to stress this. I'm not saying it isn't cool information. What I'm saying is that I can use those 40, 50 words somewhere else to be more showy, to make the reader get more impact on the story that they're reading, as opposed to this cool information,
Yeah.
which isn't going to impact the reader. It's just cool
Yeah.
information.
So yeah, so there's certainly things that I would cut here to trim it down, because as I read that line 7, I was like, you don't need that.
Yeah.
You've just spent a paragraph really putting this in an impactful, interesting way.
Yeah.
You don't need that.
Yeah. You've literally already told me that they moved to rid the world of emotion in that opening paragraph. It's
Yeah.
completely redundant and a very blatant tell.
Yeah. Okay, I'll pick up on line 24. Universal basic income had made it so no one needed to work, and the robots couldn't keep up with infrastructure deemed of little value to the powers that be. The world outside Elysium had turned decrepit.
So, I mean, that's another massive run-on sentence that I don't even know.
I understand what the author's trying to say. So universal basic income means nobody has to work.
Right.
So nobody works. So there's no need for infrastructure, and the robots couldn't keep up, didn't keep up, basically, couldn't be bothered to keep up with infrastructure deemed of little value. And so the world outside Elysium had turned decrepit.
But it doesn't connect. It's not, there's,
Yeah.
it's not a sentence. It's just a rambling run-on sentence of
Yeah.
non-connected thoughts. It's also in complete juxtaposition to the paragraph before it.
Yeah.
Like, you just told me that Elysium was crumbling and decrepit, and now you're telling me that the world outside Elysium is crumbling and decrepit. Then where's the difference between the two?
Yeah.
Because the first one makes it sound like the world is still nice. It's just that Elysium is bad. And then this sentence makes it sound like Elysium is good, but the world outside is bad.
This whole paragraph feels like a run-on sentence, because I've just read through the whole thing now.
Yeah, me too.
And it's hella hard to parse.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe what the author was going for was to create a sense of kind of lifelessness or weirdness or listlessness. But I can kind of see the artistic aim of that, but the reader still has to be able to consume the information. It's like people who write completely confused battle scenes where you can't figure out what's going on, and they're like, but battle is like that. Yes, but the reader still has to consume
Yes.
the scene. You can't make it as confusing as battle, because the reader's going to get confused and put the book down. Like,
Yeah.
so, and I feel like the same thing's going on here. It feels like a listless run-on sentence of things that have just happened, but the reader still has to consume the information.
Right.
It cannot be this many run-on sentences.
Well, it's also, we're starting world building a second time. So we first start off world building with this psychological warfare between the government and its people. And then we're starting a completely different story, it feels like, that it's a post-apocalyptic world. So one thing to think about is to just roll this in. Start off with the psychological warfare, and then just the world be the world. Like, we don't need to, well, and again, you can do whatever you want, but that's what it feels like to me. It feels like you're starting the story a second time instead of continuing the story from the intro that we already have.
Yeah. I kind of get where this is going. It's basically setting up that because people don't have to work, they don't. And so there's no need for any work because all work is done by robots. And people just get enough food to do what they want and they don't drive anywhere, they don't do anything,
Right.
basically. Yeah. Okay, sure. Shall I pick up on 31?
Sure.
Because we finally hit the character. Sarah still walked, still enjoyed walking, seeing the sunset and the outdoors, even if things weren't perfect. Nature was unaffected and happy to reclaim what man had let go. Even as the world dulled around her, there was a feeling inside her that she couldn't ignore. It ran beneath her skin, a quiet, dangerous reminder that in this crumbling, emotionless wasteland, there were still things worth feeling. And John was one of those things. Okay, I'm going to stop here and just talk about this paragraph. This sentence is generic. And by generic, I mean it tells me nothing. It is a generality. Don't write in generalities. If you find yourself writing the word something, consider it at least twice before leaving it in place. I'm not saying there's never a place for a generality to be written. Sometimes there is a place. But this isn't the place for it, because in the very next sentence, we get a much better description of what's running, of the feeling running inside her. So rather than giving us the generality of there was a feeling inside her that she couldn't ignore, just go, even as the world dulled around her, a feeling ran beneath her skin. Full stop.
Or
Right?
even expand what that feeling is. A
Yeah.
feeling that there were things worth feeling, I wouldn't do the double
Yeah.
feel, but, ran beneath
Yeah.
her skin or whatever.
Yeah.
But here's another problem that I have. I have a continuity problem with this because how would so she can know that something feels off, but how does she know that the world, I mean, if this is the world she lives in, the world she was born to, the world that she grew up in, it would just be the normal world. It's weird to us, the reader,
Yeah.
but it's not weird to her.
And I mean, she can't have grown up in our world and now had the feelings thing sprung on her.
Right. Scroll up to the beginning of the beginning of this line one. Yeah, so it's just the world she lived in.
Emotions had long been outlawed.
Yeah. So this is the world. So she would not think it's weird that emotions are outlawed. So that's the other continuity issue that I have with this one. It makes me feel
I
like
guess unless she's like 60 and this has happened over the course of her life.
I mean, maybe. I'm just saying it makes me feel, and again,
Yeah.
this is, I'm not saying that this is the intent of it, but when I got down to that section, I was disconnected with the story because I was like, wait, I thought she lived in this world. I thought this was the
Mm,
world she lived in. And now it feels like it's that that there's something else. So I'm just saying
yeah.
that there was a continuity issue there for me. It made me
Yeah.
feel weird.
For me, the biggest problem is we've been given this whole world and now we're connecting to the character and I'm not
Right.
connecting. And I'm not connecting because we're not in the character's head. Even though we've jumped down into the character, even though we've now left behind the world building, we're not in the character's head.
No, it's still omniscient. Still
Yeah,
100% omniscient.
it's very omniscient, and it's not giving me enough to feel for her. Now, I know it's just 2 paragraphs. I get that. But yeah. She wasn't supposed to feel this way about him the way she did. She wasn't supposed to feel this deeply, this intensely, but how could she help it? The weight of it, the heaviness of that feeling was like a knot twisting tighter in her chest. Every day she fought to keep it hidden, to keep the smile off her face when he looked at her, to hold back the tears when he said something that made her heart skip. God, it's so hard to hide it. That was better.
Well, except for we have kind of the same problem with she wasn't supposed to feel this way. She wasn't supposed to feel this way, this in deep. I wrote one or the other because they both are basically saying the same thing.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really build into it. And I think that she wasn't supposed to feel so deep that she wasn't supposed to feel this. She wasn't supposed to feel this deeply, this intensely.
Yeah, that's definitely repeating. But here we're getting somewhat deeper into the character, at least from after the rhetorical question.
Right.
Sometimes she watched him when he wasn't paying attention, studying the curve of his lip or the way his brow furrowed when he was in deep thought. Those small moments were enough to fill her with something dangerous, something she had to choke back, and day after day she did. He never seemed to struggle the way she did. John was calm, always, moving through the world like a perfect citizen. He played by the rules, kept his face neutral in public, never raised his voice, never let a flicker of emotion slip, never got a demerit. Sarah envied that about him, envied how he made it seem so easy. Maybe that's why she loved him so much. Because even though he followed the law, even though he fit perfectly into this emotionless world, she knew he felt something too. She could see it in the way he looked at her, the way his hand lingered just a little too long on hers when they were alone. He loves me, she told herself. He'd never say it, of course. Saying it out loud would have been dangerous, too much risk. But Sarah knew it. She had to believe he loved her. That was the only thing that kept her from losing her mind in a world that no longer allowed people to feel. But sometimes the weight of that idea was too much to bear. Okay, so this is very stream of consciousness. I don't know what Sarah's doing right now. She's not, this is just telling me about Sarah.
Right.
And I know it's a short story, but we are 2 pages in, and I'm just getting the backstory. Like, we're not at the plot yet. We have no hook into the story. It's interesting. It's an interesting setup. But where is the story?
As I always say, the 4 things we want to do as quickly as possible. Whose head am I in? Where am I at? Why am I here? And what is the cool hook that's going to make me go, ooh, okay, I want to keep reading.
Yeah. The world would have been enough to get me reading to this page, but at this point, I want some story. Like, not just the background.
Right. It's all just backstory.
Yeah.
Up to this point, it's all world building and backstory.
It's world building and it's the character's backstory. That's it.
Yeah, most readers don't have the patience for it, to get this long into it and not be hooked into some type of story.
Yeah. This backstory can come later. What is going on right now?
Well, so far, there's nothing that convinced me that this couldn't all be done in the moment.
Yeah.
You know, just dropping right into Sarah's life and we could get the world building, we could get her backstory, we could everything during a scene where she's actually doing something, where something is actually happening that we can be grounded to. It's why I'm not a huge fan of Omniscient, because Omniscient, it just is this telly. There's no point of view that pushes the reader further from the story than Omniscient. It keeps them at arm's length. It's the reason why half the people who start reading Lord of the Rings never finish it, even though it's the most well-known fantasy, tale told. Half the people who start reading it can't finish it. And it's the Omniscient that pushes people away.
You could open this story with a scene of Sarah in public with John,
Yeah.
hiding their emotions, and give the reader the information that way. And then have Sarah questioning, does he really love me? Yes, he does. His hand lingered on mine, etc., etc. And you can give the information that way as they're taking a walk. And that
Right.
will engage the reader further into what's happening. But you still need a hook. I still don't know where the story is going. Is this like a story of breaking free? Is she going to end up demerited and sent to Elysium? There's no hook here. Where is the story?
Right. It's a very interesting world. It's a very interesting backstory of a character, but there's no story as of yet.
Yeah. And we are 60 lines in, which is a lot. It's a lot to have no inkling of any kind of story in a short story.
Yeah.
Okay. He loves me. He'd never said it, of course. Saying it out loud would have been dangerous, too much risk. But Sarah knew it. She had to believe he loved her. That was the only thing that kept her from losing her mind in a world that no longer allowed people to feel. But sometimes the weight of that idea was too much to bear. She would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, feeling the pressure of it building inside her, threatening to spill out. What would happen if she let it? What would happen if, one day, she couldn't keep it in any longer? The thought terrified her, and yet a part of her wanted to let go, to scream, to cry, to laugh, to show John just how much he meant to her. But those were dangerous thoughts, the kind that got people taken away. And then there were the stories, the ones people whispered when they thought no one was listening. Stories about Elysium, the sanitarium down by the rotting interstate. Everyone knew what went on there, but no one wanted to talk about it in public. Only when you were alone and all pocket devices and listening devices had been turned off or masking sound was on. Then they would say the people who went in there never came out the same. Or they didn't come out at all, straight to the funeral home on the other side of the overpass. You had to go through the protective tunnel they'd built out of Conex boxes linked together to keep pieces of the bridge from killing people as they walked underneath on their way to the funeral home to say goodbye. There's a lot of run-on sentences in this thing.
Yeah.
Elysium wasn't the place where you went to get better. It was a place you went to disappear, to be wiped clean of whatever emotions had marked you as different. People would come back like shells of themselves, quiet, numb, dead in their eyes. Others were just on display at the funeral home in a few days.
So everything in that paragraph is redundant from the couple of paragraphs before it, which is redundant from what we already got when we learned all this stuff.
There is a lot of repeated information in here.
Mm-hmm.
A lot. And there are genres where that kind of repeated information works, but they're generally in the literary kind of genres.
Yeah.
And it tends to be very much stream of consciousness writing, which is fine, but in a short story, in a piece of genre fantasy, you're going to need to get to the point faster than this.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing about Omniscient. So because it is telly, because it does keep the reader at arm's length, it does need to move. So there's a reason why once upon a time there was an old lady who lived in a shoe. and then we talk about it, and we give that information, and we move to the next piece of information, and then we give that piece of information. Each one of those pieces of information leads to the next piece of information. We don't backtrack, we don't meander, we don't stream of consciousness it. First person is where you can get away with stream of consciousness more than in anything else, because it is technically kind of stream of consciousness. You still can't meander this much and be repetitive this much, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But in Omniscient, I would assume that most readers are going to kind of get to this point and they will have lost. Like, that opening paragraph was such a great opening paragraph for an Omniscient paragraph, for a Telly paragraph. It still works really, really well. By the time I get down there, I'm definitely going to be moving on to something else. You've given me no new information. It's a bunch of repetitiveness. It's a bunch of stuff that doesn't connect to anything. There's no story yet. I'm not connected to any character. So,
And honestly, I'm like, not just am I not connected to a character, not just is there no story, but I've had a hard time parsing these sentences because there's so many run-on sentences. So I battled my way through understanding what you're trying to tell me.
right.
So genuinely, like, this needs a red line edit. You need to sit down with a red line pen, and every piece of information that is vaguely repeated needs to be cut and trimmed down. Because if you're going to keep it in this kind of omniscient voice, you've got to give the information faster than this.
Mhm.
And with less repetition. And in clearer sentences. So that would be my key takeaway, my key advice to this author is trim down on the repetitiveness, and please, please go look at those run-on sentences because they are long and confusing.
Yes. Very much so.
And I think we can
I
stop
mean, I
there.
was going to try to pull up something, but I don't think I can. I think I would need to walk over and grab it. But hold on a second. Give me just 1 second. I just want to kind of get into a little deeper discussion about this. I think it might be beneficial.
Sure.
So I'm skipping the prologue, but since I mentioned the Lord of the Rings a couple times, just the opening couple of paragraphs of Lord of the Rings. Again, this is Omniscient as well, so it's going to be Telly. It's going to be, kind of a narrator telling a story of somebody else. But
Yep.
when Mr. Bilbo Baggins of Bag's Inn announced that he would shortly be celebrating his 11th birthday with a party of special magnificence, there was much talk and excitement in Hobbiton. Bilbo was very rich and very peculiar, and had been the wonder of the Shire for 60 years, ever since his remarkable disappearance and unexpected return. The riches he had brought back from his travels had now become a local legend, and it was popularly believed, whatever the old folk might say, that the hill at Bag End was full of tunnels stuffed with treasure. And if that was not enough for fame, there was also his prolonged vigor to marvel at. Time wore on, but it seemed to have little effect on Mr. Baggins. At 90, he was much the same as at 50. At 99, they began to call him well preserved, but unchanged would have been nearer to the mark. There were some that shook their heads at the thought this was too much of a good thing. It seemed unfair that anyone should possess, apparently, perpetual youth as well as reputedly inexhaustible wealth. It would have been paid for, they said, or it will have to be paid for, they said. It isn't natural, and trouble will come of it. But so far, trouble had not come. So it's still Telly. It's still...
But
But it just moves.
You know that one, it moves, there's no repetition of information, and you know that there is an event coming because
Right.
it opens with when Bilbo Baggins announced his 11th birthday. So whatever you're getting through here, there is this event coming. And you get that right in the first sentence.
Yeah.
The problem with the story we've just critiqued is there's no promise of what's coming. There's
Right.
just backstory. There's no, there is an event coming. There is a thing coming. None of that's there. It's just, here's all the backstory. Okay, but why? Why
Right.
am I reading this backstory? Where is my event?
Yeah. So if we go off of the four things that I talk about, so whose head am I in? I'm in a narrator's head talking about somebody named Mr. Bilbo Baggins. Where am I at? I'm in some place called Hobbiton with a bunch of hobbits, whatever they are. We don't know yet. Why am I here? There's a 111th birthday party that has just been announced that's going to happen. And we're going to find out that he's very long lived and still doesn't look his age. And so that's kind of the, you could say, the cool thing that makes you go, okay. So he went on an adventure. He's rumored to have tons of treasure, tons of wealth, and he still is as spry at 99 as he was at 59. So it's something interesting. And again, this is all subjective. So you can go, well, that's not interesting to me. And you'd be right. It isn't interesting to you. But other people will go, wow, that's really interesting to me. And they will be right because it'll be really interesting to them. But that's the
So,
thing that we have in the opening of this.
yeah.
And again, I'm
And
not trying to say you have to be as good as Lord of the Rings when you're writing Omniscient. I'm just I wanted to show, and I haven't read that in decades, but I wanted to show that it's still telly. It's still not immersive. It's not in the immediacy. It's not in limited or anything like that. But we're in the moment. We're still somewhere with something to do.
yeah. And I think that is the biggest thing that this author missed because that opening paragraph was interesting. The world was interesting. It was an
And
interesting setup, but there was no the character was mentioned once, and there's no reason why we're here. Why are we in this moment? We don't know. We don't even know what moment we're in because it's all just being backgrounded at us.
mhm.
So even in Omniscient, you have to give the reader why we're here. What is the event?
And if, and again, this is all subjective, so take it with a grain of salt. But my recommendation would be everything after that opening paragraph is we need to find a way to give it to the reader in a moment. And we can stay in omniscient, like Lord of the Rings, but we drop into a moment. So that opening paragraph can be, this esoteric thing that's not connected to anything. Here's this overarching, like I said about, I think it was the Black Mask from Jet Li. Here's the way the world is.
Yeah.
But then, because you mentioned Sarah's name, it's Sarah, right? I think it was.
Yeah,
You
Sarah,
mentioned
yeah.
Sarah's name in that first sentence. Now we need to be focused on Sarah. We need to be, Sarah was at this place. I need to know the incongruencies that I had was, does she remember life before emotions were? Because if it's written and told to me as if she wouldn't, but it's written as if she does.
Yeah.
And so there's an inconsistency there that my brain is trying to reconcile that I can't reconcile with the information that I'm given.
Yeah.
But and then a lot of run-on sentences.
Yep. Yeah. Seriously, you got to watch those things. That got out of hand. Like I said, at one point I was like, I need a map, a compass, and some directions here. I need to pull the sentence over at the gas station and ask where I'm at.
Yeah, where's my noun?
Yeah, where's my noun? Because I'm lost.
So, where's my noun and how do I get to the verb?
Yeah.
But
Yeah, so watch those run-ons. They
well, and
are
it's so funny because there was none of that in that opening paragraph, and it was so much so that I took a sentence that wasn't a run-on sentence and showed breaking it up to just make them both have a little bit more punch.
Yeah.
But then once we got down, there was none of that. It was this whole sentence needs to be rejiggered and reworked to not
make sense.
lose the reader.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that is a fair take on the story. So I hope that was useful to the author. I hope that was useful to anybody listening. If you're going to write an omniscient, you can write an omniscient, but you still have to meet the requirements of a scene. You still need to give the reader a reason why we're in this moment.
And if you are writing a short story, it's all about efficiency. So every line you write when you're in editing mode, because when you're in stream of consciousness, you're writing it. But when you're in editing mode, you need to look at every little line and go, does the reader absolutely have to have this piece of information to understand the story? And if the answer is no, then a lot of times allowing, Ray Bradbury, was it Ray? No, it wasn't Ray Bradbury. Who did the Alfred Hitchcock? Alfred Hitchcock said, believe me, that the terror that the audience will create in their own mind is way better than the terror I could ever create on screen. So when you use the less is more approach, you can get away with a lot of information. You can hint at something and the reader will just fill that stuff in. You just give them exactly what they need, like the banning of emotions. We can give them just enough to put them on the edge of thinking about how horrific that would be, and then allow them to fill in those pieces. And so just some things to think about when you're writing short stories. Short stories are tough. I'm not a huge fan of writing short stories. That's why I the jobs that I take now, I'll only do novellas, 25,000 words or more, because I like to have that time to go into depth and to be a lot more showy. It's just my writing style. But
short
actually,
stories are tough. They are, but you need to be efficient in that.
Yeah, actually, for those that are subscribed to my newsletter, which you can subscribe to for free at starvingwriterstudio.com, in this month's missive is one of my short stories. So it's a short story called Holocaust that they get to read as a part of that. They get something from me to read every single month.
Okay. Yeah. My newsletter is more about world building and stuff like that.
Right.
Okay, so I think that is, which you can subscribe to on my website, to my newsletter, if you're interested in world building stuff, mariemullaney.com. So.
And all of those links will be in the down below.
Links all down below to both our newsletters. Go and subscribe so you keep up to date. And I think that is a good note on which to end this episode.
Absolutely.
We will see you soon for another one.
Bye.
If you are ready to take your writing to the next level and work with a group of highly motivated, dedicated writers who are all working to not only improve their writing, but improve your writing, plus you get to work with me on a weekly basis, then I'll encourage you to check out writersroom.us. This is a website that I have created that I really wish I had 30 years ago. It's everything a writer needs to become a better writer. Not only do we do weekly critique sessions, both from other members as well as me, we have daily writing sessions, I do monthly classes, Q&As, we have activities, I do all sorts of learning exercises, such as I do a quarterly writing prompt contest, and just tons and tons and tons of things. So if you're ready to get serious about your writing and you want to actually finish that novel and have a chance of it being published, then I encourage you to head on over to the Writer's Room and join me there. And as a special promotion for listeners of Releasing Your Inner Dragon, I'll go one step more. If you would like to get 50% off for 3 months, reach out to me. There's a million ways you can do that. You can do it through starvingwriterstudio.com, drakeu.com, any of my social medias such as LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X, whatever. Reach out to me, say that you would like to check out the Writer's Room for 50% off, and I will send you a link that will allow you to do just that. So hopefully you're ready to start getting serious about writing, and I'll see you in the Writer's Room.
Thank you for tuning in. This is Marie Mullaney, your co-host on this literary adventure. Our goal is to provide you with valuable insights and discussions on writing. If you believe in our mission, please like and subscribe our podcast.
Sharing our episodes with your community not only helps us grow, but also contributes to a richer, more diverse conversation about storytelling. We appreciate your support. For a deeper understanding of the topics we've discussed, head over to Just in Time Worlds on YouTube. It is a treasure trove where fantasy meets history and science. Every Tuesday, you'll find new videos that delve into the intricacies of world building, drawing from our rich real-world history. Whether you're a writer, a role player, or just a fantasy enthusiast, Just in Time Worlds offers unique insights that will enrich your perspective. Check it out and join the journey of crafting incredible worlds.